What would you do if a sheriff risked everything for a forbidden love, only to face a curse that no bullet could kill? Could you trust a singer accused of bringing death with every song? Or would you stand with the town that demanded her blood? Stay until the end, you'll discover the chilling truth behind Ash Creek's blood moon. And tell me, do you believe curses are real, or just a man's darkest fear? Welcome to WestDreamTales, where forbidden love, blood-soaked curses, and the Wild West's darkest secrets come alive. Tonight, Ash Creek holds a story you won't forget. Watch until the end, because the last moments will leave you breathless. And if you crave more Western Gothic tales, subscribe now, hit like, and ride with us into the next legend. Autumn, 1883. The town square of Ash Creek trembled under the 13th blood moon. Red light spilled across the dirt, staining every face with a ghostly hue. A rope swayed from the wooden beam, waiting in silence. Sheriff Ethan Ward stood bound, wrists cut by coarse hemp. His jaw stayed firm, but his eyes betrayed the storm within. Next to him, Maria Vega's dark hair fluttered in the desert wind, her lips pale but unbroken. The crowd pressed close, voices sharp as broken glass. Some cursed, others crossed themselves in fear. Children hid behind skirts, but their eyes still peaked, wide with dread. On the saloon steps, Silas Crowther leaned against a post. His silver vest caught the torchlight, and his smile lingered like a knife. Around him, the iron pike men gripped their rifles, shadows carved in firelight. Hang them before the curse spreads, someone shouted. The chant echoed until it filled the night. Maria flinched, but Ethan leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers. Their eyes locked, silent and desperate. For a heartbeat, the square faded. Only her breath reached him, shallow and uneven. It was enough to remind him she was alive, and he was not ready to let her go. The preacher lifted his Bible, voice trembling more than his hands. The border is cursed. 3 couples vanished before. Do not tempt fate again. His warning drowned beneath the crowd's fury. 2 men dragged Maria forward. She stumbled, catching herself against Ethan's arm. His hand brushed hers, rough callus against fragile skin. The fleeting touch was rebellion in itself. The noose dropped over Ethan's neck. He did not bow. His gaze stayed on Maria, who now bore her own rope. The crowd cheered, convinced that superstition had become justice. The blood moon flared brighter, painting the dust in crimson haze. The air thickened, as though the desert itself held its breath. From far away, a coyote's howl broke the silence, jagged and mournful. Maria whispered, barely audible, "It isn't fair." Ethan's reply came rough, yet steady. "Hold on." The executioner stepped forward, boots sinking into the dirt. His hands touched the lever. The beam groaned, and the rope tightened. Torches flickered as the wind rose, a sudden storm out of nowhere. Then the night shattered. A scream tore through the chanting, high and raw. The crowd froze as a man staggered forward, clutching his chest. Blood spread across his shirt, though no blade had touched him. He collapsed face first into the dust, his body twitching once before going still. Silence swallowed the square. The nooses swung above Ethan and Maria, forgotten in the shock. Mothers pulled children close. Men raised rifles but found no target. The preacher dropped his Bible, words failing him. Silas's smile faltered. His eyes darted, searching his men, but they looked just as shaken. The spectacle he had controlled slipped from his hands. Ethan's pulse thundered. He was bound, helpless, but his mind cut through the haze. If Maria was tied beside him, she could not be guilty of the death before them. The townsfolk shifted, murmurs spreading like fire across dry grass. If she's not guilty, then what's killing us? Fear sharpened their voices more than hatred ever had. Maria raised her gaze to Ethan's. For the first time that night, hope flickered through terror. They were still alive, and something darker than superstition had stepped into Ash Creek. And under the 13th blood moon, the night had only just begun. Ash Creek had not always carried the weight of curses. Years earlier, it was a promise of opportunity, a town built on dust, sweat, and stubborn hope. Wagons rolled in from both sides of the border, their wheels cutting lines into the earth like signatures of survival. Families from Mexico brought guitars, clay pots, and stories of saints. Settlers from the north carried rifles, farming tools, and Bibles. Together they erected cabins and storefronts, though the cracks of difference were visible even in fresh timber. The saloon came first. Of course, the painted coyote stood at the heart of the street, its swinging doors never still. Laughter, shouts, and the shuffle of boots marked it as the pulse of Ash Creek. By night, its lamps spilled light into the dust, calling cowhands and wanderers alike. Maria Vega sang there, her voice carrying above the rattle of dice and clink of glasses. Songs of longing and sorrow mixed with fire, echoing the deserts she had crossed. For some, her music softened the edge of exile. For others, it deepened mistrust. Sheriff Ethan Ward often lingered near the back wall. He claimed his presence was duty, a quiet eye on drunks and cheats. Yet more often than not, his gaze found Maria, her song holding him in a silence the crowd never noticed. He had been widowed for 3 winters. His wife, Clara, had died in childbirth, leaving him a man stitched together by duty and grief. Law was all he trusted now. Though law had grown thin in a place like Ash Creek, Maria carried her own scars. Whispers said she fled from Sonora after her brother vanished at the border. Others claimed her family was tied to the lost couples, those who disappeared beneath the blood moon. She never confirmed nor denied, only sang. Silas Crowther thrived in that soil of half-truths. Arriving with wagons of liquor and gambling tables, he set roots deeper than any preacher or farmer. His company, Iron Pike, wore the guise of guards but acted as wolves, claiming debts in coin or flesh. The town tolerated him, as towns often tolerate devils who bring gold. His silver tongue and glittering vest became as much a landmark as the saloon doors. Yet behind every smile, his hunger sharpened. Ethan clashed with him more than once. Drunken brawls, rigged card games, missing cattle all traced back to Silas. Each time the sheriff tried to press charges, witnesses vanished or refused to speak. The law was a lantern dimmed by shadow. Still, Ethan held to his oath. He walked the streets at dawn and dusk, tipping his hat to widows, hauling drunks to the jail, mending fences with hands calloused from more than gunplay. He belonged to the town even as it frayed around him. One evening, as Maria left the saloon, a group of ranch hands staggered from the shadows. Their words were thick with whiskey and venom. They called her a witch, a temptress, cursed blood. Before their hands could reach her, Ethan stepped between. His revolver stayed holstered, but his stance was enough. The men muttered curses and spat into the dirt before slinking away. Maria's hand brushed his sleeve, a whisper of thanks. For a moment, their eyes met, fragile yet unyielding. Subtle glances hung there like a promise neither dared to speak. Rumors thickened after that night. Livestock fell sick without cause, and some swore they saw shadows moving at the river when no moon shone. Each misfortune was tied to Maria's name, as if her song summoned calamity. The preacher fanned the flames, citing scripture about forbidden unions. The Lord divided peoples for a reason, he warned. To cross the line is to invite wrath. His sermons drew crowds hungry for explanation, and Maria became the easiest answer. Ethan grew weary of the whispers. Yet each time he looked at Maria, singing in the lamplight, he found steadiness in her defiance. She sang not to be loved, but to endure, and he understood endurance better than most. One market morning, Ethan caught her at a stall. She traded coins for dried chilies, her shawl pulled tight against the chill. He tipped his hat, and she offered a faint smile. Their hands brushed as he passed her a basket. Gentle touch lingered longer than the transaction. From the corner, Silas watched. His smirk carried calculation, not warmth. He had wanted Maria for months. Her beauty and mystery and ornament he believed deserved to adorn his power. Seeing her hand graze Ethan's lit a darker hunger. That week, a rancher was found dead in his barn, chest clawed open as though by some beast. His family swore they heard singing in the distance just before the screams. Fear twisted swiftly into accusation. Crowds gathered at the saloon, demanding Maria explain herself. Ethan stepped in, his badge heavy on his chest, his hand resting lightly near his revolver. He declared the case unsolved, the evidence unclear. Murmurs turned to outrage. Silas seized the moment. Standing tall by the bar, He called out, "The curse walks among us, and she carries it with her voice." His words spread through Ash Creek like a spark on dry sage. Ethan led Maria out the back door that night. The street was silent except for the creak of shutters and the hiss of wind. She trembled, though her chin stayed high. "You shouldn't have to stand alone," Ethan said. His hand steadied her shoulder. She turned toward him, and in the lamplight of the alley, fear gave way to a fragile calm. She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest, his lips brushing her hair. It was not passion but a vow, unspoken yet binding. But the night did not stay merciful. From the far end of town, a horse screamed. People poured into the street as 7 animals collapsed at the hitching post. Eyes rolled white, breath foaming as if seized by invisible hands. Cries erupted. The curse, fingers pointed, and all eyes found Maria once more. Ethan's arms still circled her, but the crowd's fury surged. Silas's voice cut above the chaos, smooth and sharp. "How many must die before we act? Will you wait for your own child's blood?" His words drew gasps, his theater complete. The preacher lifted his hands, but his voice cracked under the roar. The townsfolk no longer wanted prayer. They wanted a culprit. Ethan pulled Maria back toward the jailhouse, trying to shield her beneath his oath and badge. Yet he felt the tide turning, the town slipping beyond his reach. Inside the cell, she sat on the bench, head bowed but not broken. "You don't believe them, do you?" she whispered. Ethan crouched low, meeting her eyes. "I've buried lies before. I won't bury you." The lantern between them flickered. For a moment, the world shrank to that cell, 2 hearts pressed against the weight of superstition. Subtle glances lingered again, softer but sharper than chains. The door slammed open. The shopkeeper stumbled in, face drained of color. In his hands, a torn shawl dripped with blood. "My wife is gone," he gasped. "She vanished in the night. This was all I found." The embroidery was Mexican, the pattern unmistakable. The air grew colder in the small room. Ethan clenched his fists, while Maria's voice shook. "That isn't mine." But outside, the crowd had already begun to stir again. Whispers spread like wildfire, and the line between suspicion and judgment thinned to nothing. Ash Creek awoke the next morning under a sky the color of ash. Dust rolled low across the street, carrying whispers from the night before. People moved quickly, avoiding eye contact, as though fear itself had taken root in the ground. The news of the vanished shopkeeper's wife spread faster than wildfire. The torn shawl lay displayed at the preacher's steps, a relic of dread. Some swore they had seen Maria wearing the same pattern, though memory shifted like sand. Inside the jailhouse, Ethan sat with his head bowed, watching Maria through the iron bars. Her face was pale but steady, her hands folded as if holding herself together. Each silence between them seemed louder than words. "I told you it wasn't mine," Maria said softly. Her voice cracked only at the edges. Ethan met her gaze, refusing to look away. "I believe you," he answered, though belief was no longer enough to sway the town. By noon, a crowd gathered outside. Shouts demanded action. Fists pounded on the wooden doors. Ethan stood alone against the tide, his badge a frail shield in the storm of voices. Silas appeared, as expected. He raised his hands, calling for calm, his vest gleaming as if he were a savior. But his words dripped poison. Every night, more blood. Every morning, more fear. And still we let the curse sing among us. The crowd roared back in agreement. Mothers clutched children, ranchers waved rifles, and whispers turned into a chant that shook the boards beneath their feet. Ethan clenched his jaw, knowing reason could no longer hold them. That evening, Ethan released Maria from the cell and led her through a back passage. "If they break through, they'll kill you," he said. Maria's hand lingered on his arm. "And what about you?" she asked. He didn't answer. They slipped into the alleys, shadows stretching long in the twilight. The town felt like a battlefield waiting for a spark. Lamps flickered in windows, eyes watching from behind curtains. Suspicion pressed against every wall. At the stable, Maria paused, touching the flank of a horse as if drawing strength. Ethan saddled it with quick, practiced hands. He helped her mount, fingers brushing against hers in the dim light. She looked down at him, her lips trembling with words unsaid. Before either could speak, gunshots cracked through the air. Shouts erupted as men spilled from the street, torches flaring. Silas's voice carried above them. The sheriff hides her. The curse hides with him. Ethan pulled Maria from the horse and dragged her into the stable's shadows. The flames outside painted the walls in red. Maria pressed close against him, heart pounding loud enough he could feel it through her dress. The mob stormed past, searching every corner. Ethan held her still, one arm shielding her, their faces inches apart. Her breath warmed his cheek, her eyes locked on his. In that silence, fear and longing fused into something neither could deny. The mob moved on, and Ethan guided Maria out the rear door. They fled into the desert, the sound of pursuit fading behind them. Stars rose overhead, sharp and cold, the only witnesses to their escape. They rode until the moon was high. At last, Ethan stopped near an old adobe ruin by the dry creek. The stones crumbled, but they offered shelter. He helped Maria down, his hands steady despite the storm inside him. She leaned against the wall, her shawl wrapped tight. "How long can we run?" she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "Until the truth shows itself, or until they kill us." For a moment, neither spoke. The desert wind hissed through the broken stones. Maria reached for his hand, their fingers lacing together as if they had always known this shape. He pulled her into his arms, and she pressed her forehead to his chest. His lips brushed her hair, a vow without words. But Ash Creek refused to sleep. Back in town, the preacher lit candles at the church, leading prayers that sounded more like curses. Silas gathered men in the saloon, pouring whiskey and promises, shaping fear into a weapon. By dawn, another body was found near the river. A young boy, no older than 10, his skin pale, his eyes wide as if frozen mid-scream. The sight broke the last threads of doubt. People no longer questioned whether the curse was real. They only questioned who carried it. Word reached Ethan as he and Maria prepared to ride farther south. His face hardened as he heard the description. The boy's mother had sworn she saw a figure singing near the river, shawl fluttering in the wind. She swore it was Maria. Maria shook, clutching Ethan's coat. "I wasn't there," she pleaded. "I swear it." Ethan pulled her close, his jaw set. "I know, but they'll never believe it." They decided to return, for running would only tighten the noose. At sunrise, they rode back toward the town square, the streets already thick with bodies and shouts. The air buzzed with fury, waiting to ignite. Silas stood tall on the saloon balcony, arms wide as though he ruled the sky. "Even children are taken now," he cried, "and still she lives among us. What justice is this?" The crowd answered with rage, their chants shaking the timbers. Ethan dismounted, pulling Maria close as he walked her toward the jail. Every eye followed, every breath hissed. They reached the steps, and the preacher raised his Bible high. The shawl, torn and bloodstained, was nailed to the door. It hung like a banner of accusation. Maria's face blanched, and Ethan felt the weight of the trap closing in. Inside the jail, he barred the door and faced her. "They want your blood, but it's not you the curse is after." Maria stared at him, trembling. "Then what is it?" Before he could answer, the ground itself seemed to shift. A howl rose from beyond the town, deeper than any coyote's. Windows rattled, horses screamed, and the mob outside fell silent. Ethan gripped his revolver, eyes darting toward the door. Maria's hand slipped into his, cold but certain. Together, they waited as the sound faded into the desert night. The town murmured in terror, their certainty cracking. Silas clenched the railing, eyes wide. For the first time, his voice faltered. And in that fragile moment, Ethan knew the tide could still turn, but at a cost Ash Creek might never bear. Night fell over Ash Creek like a shroud. The blood moon climbed high, its crimson light spilling across roofs and dust. Torches flared along the street, flames restless in the desert wind. The square filled with bodies, their voices sharper than steel. Some carried rifles, others clutched stones, and all eyes burned toward Maria. Ethan stood before her, his revolver steady, his jaw set against the storm. On the balcony of the saloon, Silas Crowther stepped into the light, His silver vest gleamed as he spread his arms like a preacher of fear. "How many more must die?" he shouted. The curse breathed through her voice. "And still you defend it." The crowd answered in a roar, their chant pounding like drums of war. Maria shrank closer to Ethan, her hands trembling, but his voice reached her ear. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." The preacher raised his Bible high. His words boomed across the square, thick with fury. "The Lord divided nations for a reason. To defy his line is to invite ruin." His sermon stoked the crowd until it moved as one body. A lantern shattered against the jailhouse wall. Flames leapt high, smoke curling into the sky. The mob howled, and rifles lifted like spears. Ethan fired a warning shot into the air. "Back away," he bellowed. For a heartbeat, silence broke through, but Silas descended the saloon steps, eyes glinting with triumph. "You've chosen her over your oath, Sheriff," Silas sneered. "Then you'll die with her." His pistol gleamed, already half drawn. Ethan raised his revolver. "This ends with you, not her." His words carried, but the mob surged forward, screaming. Gunfire cracked. Smoke and sparks filled the square. Ethan pulled Maria into the shadows of the saloon, shielding her as bullets tore splinters from the walls. Inside, the saloon reeked of whiskey and fire. Chairs lay overturned, glasses shattered under boots. Ethan pressed Maria down behind the bar, his body between her and the storm. "They'll burn the whole town for this," Maria whispered. Ethan met her eyes. "Not if I put him in the ground first." The doors burst open. Silas's men poured in, rifles raised. Ethan fired, dropping two before the others returned shots. The bar splintered, glass exploding into shards that rained across Maria's shawl. She reached for Ethan, steadying his arm. Their faces drew close, eyes holding in the haze. In that breathless space, the world shrank to only them, until the next bullet shattered the wall. Smoke curled up the stairwell. Silas appeared at the top, pistol aimed down, his smile sharp as broken glass. "You can't stop this. The town already belongs to me." Ethan's shot rang out. The bullet ripped into Silas's chest, spinning him back against the railing. Gasps tore through the mob outside as their leader faltered. Silas staggered, clutching his wound. Blood darkened his silver vest, but his voice roared on. "See, even with my blood spilled, the curse still kills." And then it happened. A scream ripped from the crowd below. A man collapsed near the well, convulsing, his hands clawing at nothing. Blood spread across his shirt, though no weapon touched him. The square fell into chaos. Some pointed at Maria. Others screamed that it was not her. Fear turned inward, confusion spreading like fire through dry brush. On the balcony, Silas's laughter broke into coughs of blood. His knees buckled, but his eyes blazed with malice. He locked on Maria, words rasping like a curse. "They'll never forgive you. Curse or not, you'll never belong." His body tipped over the railing, crashing into the dust below. The mob recoiled, some shrieking, others standing frozen. Their prophet of fear lay broken, but the curse or what looked like it still stalked them. Ethan lowered his gun, breath ragged. Maria clutched his sleeve, her face streaked with ash and tears. Around them, the fire hissed, smoke twisting into the desert sky. The preacher dropped his Bible, his voice gone hoarse. Mothers pulled children away. Ranchers glanced at one another, doubt cracking their fury. From the far hills, the sound rose low, mournful, almost human. The torches wavered in trembling hands. No one dared move. Ethan tightened his hold on Maria, his eyes locked on the dark horizon. The town of Ash Creek had lost its master, but not its fear. And under the blood moon, something deeper had only begun to stir. Ash Creek lay smoldering in silence. Smoke curled from shattered windows. And the ground of the square was blackened with ash. Bodies had been carried away, but the weight of what lingered pressed on every soul that remained. Ethan stood in the wreckage, revolver still heavy in his hand. Maria clung to him, her shawl torn and dark with soot. Around them, neighbors who once screamed for blood now kept their distance, uncertain which fear to hold on to. The preacher's Bible lay trampled in the dust. He knelt beside it, his face pale, whispering words that carried no conviction. His faith, like the crowds, had been cracked open by what they had witnessed. A rancher's wife pointed toward Maria, her voice trembling. She wasn't near him when he died. Murmurs spread. Some nodded, remembering the man who fell by the well after Silas had already been struck down. Doubt crept in like a chill wind. Ethan guided Maria back inside the saloon, away from the stairs. The place stank of smoke and gunpowder. Shattered glass crunched beneath their boots as they found a corner untouched by flame. Maria's eyes brimmed with exhaustion. "They'll never let me stay," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "They saw what I saw. It wasn't you. Something else is moving through this town." Outside, the crowd had begun to splinter. Some dragged buckets to douse lingering fires. Others hurried to gather families for escape into the hills. The unity of hatred had dissolved into scattered survival. By dawn, the sheriff's office was filled with whispers. Ethan stood at the doorway, listening. Ranchers argued over whether to rebuild or abandon Ash Creek. Mothers wept over lost children, their grief louder than their anger. Maria sat at his desk, fingers tracing the scratches in the wood. Her voice was barely audible. "Even if they stop blaming me, the curse won't let us go." Ethan placed a hand on hers. "Then we face it together." That afternoon, Silas's body was buried on the edge of town. Few attended, and none mourned. The preacher spoke hollow words while shovels scraped dirt, and the desert wind scattered the sound. As the last mound was laid, a gasp rose from the crowd. Blood seeped through the soil, staining it dark as though the earth itself rejected him. People backed away in fear. Ethan tightened his grip on Maria's shoulder, refusing to let her flinch. Night returned with an uneasy quiet. The blood moon had set, but its shadow lingered in the town's memory. Families huddled in silence, while Ethan walked the empty streets with Maria at his side. Near the dry creek, they paused. The air felt charged, colder than the desert should allow. Maria shivered, clutching her torn shawl. Then she heard it singing, faint but clear, drifting on the wind. The melody was hers, yet she had not opened her lips. Ethan's hand found his revolver. "Stay close," he said. They followed the sound toward the ruins by the water. Among the stones, they found no figure. Only a second shawl lay draped over the rubble, embroidered with the same pattern as Maria's, its edges soaked in crimson. Her breath caught. "This belonged to my mother," she whispered, voice breaking. "She vanished years ago, under the blood moon." Ethan scanned the darkness, his pulse hammering. "Then it was never you. The curse is older than all of this." A cry echoed from the hills, low and human, yet twisted by something beyond. Torches flickered in the distance as townsfolk lifted their heads. Listening, Ethan pulled Maria close. "They'll still blame you," he said, "but now they fear what they cannot name." She leaned into him, her forehead against his chest, tears soaking the dust from his shirt. As dawn broke, Ash Creek stood fractured. Some families prepared to leave forever. Others clung to the ruins as if rebuilding could erase the night. No verdict was given on Maria. She remained between suspicion and truth, caught in the shadow of the blood moon. Ethan saddled his horse, helping Maria mount behind him. The town watched in silence as he guided them toward the desert trail. No one stopped them, but no blessing followed either. At the ridge, Maria looked back. Smoke curled from the town, rising like prayers that would never be answered. Ethan tightened his arm around her. "Whatever waits, we ride together." The horizon bled with the first light of morning. The curse had not lifted, and the answers lay hidden beyond the desert. But for now, the sheriff and the singer rode into the unknown, two souls bound by fire, love, and the haunting echo of a song not their own. Ash Creek's fires fade, but its shadows remain. Was it love that defied the curse or fear that devoured the town? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This is WestDreamTales. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories where passion and terror ride side by side. Until the next blood moon, stay curious, stay brave,